Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. And I see some Shashi. I'm not sure if you've been here before. Welcome, Shashi. But welcome, Ben, and anyone else who's a first timer. Really excited to see. I have James here as an actual portrait. I do one upgrade to my streaming setup per week. Someday I'm gonna create my own overlays instead of stealing Peruvian idols. Yeah, the James is here. You want to say hi, James?
Yeah, we're slowly getting there. I remembered like 2 days ago, I made a promise to get a camera this week, so I ordered one last minute. No idea if it's good, but lighting seems to be okay. Let me know if you got any good ideas for the next ones to get. Yeah, James Dev on Twitter, and I am Mike's Fall / the person who asks him questions and decides if he passes the interview.
Perfect. Yeah, I think James's camera is actually better than mine. I actually need to get a new camera and a bunch of other equipment. But yeah, welcome. Why don't we get right into it? Everyone that kind of knows the drill by now for the most part. So I'll just pull up the question. James, I believe this is coming from Frontend Eval, right? Today?
Yes. This question was launched about 5 minutes ago, so I made sure that Mike couldn't take a sneak peek. But if you go to frontendeval.com,
This one?
the latest question, that site, yeah, that great site. Latest question, rolling dice.
All right.
So through to get some mock-ups. I can just read through the prompt and give you some elaboration on it. We're going to create a dice roller today. So you can probably gather what's going on there. We have an input for a number of dice to roll. These are six-sided dice. Don't need to worry about any of these crazy D&D dice. Press roll, and that gives you that number of dice on random faces. That's how we're keeping it for step one. We got some interesting challenges that Alex Tech Rally actually helped me with yesterday. If we get to those, we'll see. But yeah, why don't you take it away? Ask me any questions you need to. If you need a hint, always here. But so far, I don't think you needed a single hint. So
Okay.
if we keep that streak going.
Okay, sounds good. And glad to see Tech Rally participating and writing the hints. I'm sure, or the extensions. I'm sure they're going to be very, very difficult. Great. Okay, so just thinking through how this is going to work, I'm definitely going to do this in React. I'm just thinking through like rendering the different dice is going to be such a pain in the ass if I had to do it in vanilla. Sorry, I'm just gonna check the chat real quick. Who's the stud not named Mike? Very good question. Ben says one overlay update per week. I would never have gotten started if I wanted to perfect it before I started. And Tech Rally says just a few suggestions. I'm pretty sure they're gonna be trolling me. So, all right. So I'm gonna pop into my React setup here. Start my dev server. I still remember how to do that.
I'm bumping up the fonts.
Yeah, went on it.
It's hard to see, yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's just make sure that everything is rendering. Yarn start. This is the most exciting part of the stream. Just waiting for this. All right, great. Hello world. Okay, cool. So let's think through how we're gonna do this. All right, so this could display up to 99 dice. So I'm gonna create this this input first, and then down below I'll have probably lay this out in a CSS grid, because it's a grid. There'll be 3 columns, and we'll throw all the dice in there. And styling this is gonna be kind of a pain in the ass. What I'm thinking is basically I'll have, right, because sixes look like this. So I'm thinking I'm gonna have like little slots everywhere here and have little black circles. It's gonna be top left, top right, center left, center right, the middle, bottom left, bottom right. So I'll have these slots here, and then depending on what number is showing, I'll show different. I'll highlight different like slots. Um, yeah. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different slots, and I'll highlight them according to what number is shown. So I'll have a die component that I'm imagining will take as a prop just the number that's being shown. It'll be a number from 1 to 6, and it'll show the slots appropriately. So the way that I'm going to sequence how I work on this is I'm going to try to I think this is the hardest part of the problem. I'm going to try to render all 6 dice and see what they look like, and I'll write the CSS for them, and then I'm going to go back and create this input. And I think this will be relatively easy compared to just rendering the dice. And this needs to take 1 to 99. James, I'm assuming if I put in like a negative number here or like 100, it will just show like a small error message. Yes.
Yeah, either we can, well, I won't tell you how to do it, obviously, but we want to only show dice if the number is between 1 or 99. And then you can do either show an error or do nothing.
Okay.
If it's invalid.
Okay,
I'm
going to show an error.
Okay.
Got some questions in the stream and some trolling. Grid is better for columns. Yes, I think grid would be better than Flexbox here because you can just like have a grid and you can just put all the dice in there. If you did Flexbox, you'd have to do row after row, or actually you could do flex wrap. Like it's not a huge deal in this case, but it's just in my head I picture this as a grid. It's like a 2-dimensional layout, and it'd probably be a little bit more appropriate. You could do this with flex and flex wrap, but it's not a big deal.
So before you get started, just to reiterate the process so I understand it, you're going to try and tackle the dice faces first, rendering the dice faces, and then link that to an input that you create. Is that right?
That's correct.
Sounds like a good approach.
Yep. Yeah, I generally like to start with the hardest part of the problem, because like you can get hung up on details throughout the process. And if you do that, then like, and you haven't solved the hardest part, then you're going to run out of time later. So it's good to, like if you want to tackle details throughout, that's fine. But just make sure that you do get the tough stuff out of the way first. I actually don't know if I'm like pulling my CSS in. I don't know how this is set up real quick. Let me just make sure that I'm doing this right. Okay, I think I need to import it. I'm just gonna test this real quick. I haven't tested my React setup before.
Also, presumably you're using React here, not Vanilla.js.
That's correct. Yeah. So this looks like it's refreshing properly. Great. Okay, so I'm going to make a die component. It's funny component name. And this is just going to return yeah, for lack of a better name. So I'm gonna like call this a container. Or sorry, die. And then I'll do like top left. These should probably I don't know if these should be divs. Like semantically. There's no semantics in a die rolling game.
So sorry, Michael. Lynn had a great question. Could you very briefly explain why you chose
why not Vanilla.js as Mike's fave? Yeah, so the way that I'm thinking, so like what React is like, React is really good for like basically like componentizing things. And so this die component is like relatively complex. And if I'm going to be rendering like anywhere from 1 to 99 of them, I like to I think just React is going to make it easier. It's like you could construct this with Vanilla.js, and you could create a function that constructs it. It's just a lot harder to do rather than just like, with React, I can just like render this as HTML. If I were doing this in vanilla, I would need to like do the whole like document.create element, document.create element. Like I had to create a bunch of divs and put them all inside the die and then insert that entire thing into the DOM. This just makes it a little bit like that's essentially what React is doing under the hood, but like the ergonomics are a little bit better here. We could be here all day or use React. I think I could do this in an hour if in vanilla. If you've watched my earlier streams, I'm pretty decent at it, but it'll be a pain in the ass. Would you use Vue, Angular, or Svelte 2? Yes, any of those are valid options for like the core thing is like componentizing, passing like basically like I want to get it to a place where I can just pass one number to the die and it knows how to render. And you could do that with vanilla, but it's more annoying.
I'd also say use what you're comfortable with.
Agreed.
Like definitely use what's best for the situation, but make sure you're actually comfortable using the library or the framework or whatever you're using. Like there's no point in using Angular if you never used it, you don't know how to use it. Like, yeah, just use what feels best in the interview plus what you're comfortable with.
I actually don't know if I should have used TypeScript, just because I don't think you'll get to use TypeScript at most places, but I'm just gonna do TypeScript for now, and then we can not use TypeScript ever in the future.
That's ambitious for an interview.
Yeah. So if value, I think like, so I want to basically do some validation here. Or value is greater than 6. I'm just gonna throw an error being like invalid value passed to die. All right. So I will then do, okay, so I was saying like top right, middle left, middle right, center, and then bottom. And then I'm just going to namespace these with them. And then I'm going to, yeah, so I'm just going to render all 7 of the die, like, and I'm just going to render one of these dice. And just see how this looks. And then after that, I'm going to come back and replace this with values 1 through 6. I'll just start with 1 right now. So the die will be a square. I'm just going to call this width, I don't know, 40 pixels. Height, 40 pixels. I'm going to do border, 2 pixels solid black. All right, that's 1 die. I'm just going to like put this in the center here. Max width, 1000 pixels. That didn't work. Oh, that did work. It's just because my screen is really narrow. So I'll just make this like 600 pixels. I'll put margin top like 40 pixels just so it's not like butting up against the head. All right. Great. Okay, so then under die, I guess this is going to be position relative, so I can absolute everything. Oh, this is annoying. I could flexbox this too if I really hated myself.
I will say there are lots of different ways to do this. I did some research last night. I tried my own way. I don't know if it's the best, but yeah, lots of different ways to do it. So no judgment if you pick something janky.
Yeah. So I'm gonna position absolute it. So I'm gonna say that like let's just say this is 5 pixels away from whatever edge it's at. And all these I think need to be I'm gonna need to do the transform on them. Actually, no, hold on. Let me think through this. All right, I'm just gonna start with the top left, and then I'm gonna do the top left and the center, and I'm just gonna like go from there. So top 5 pixels, left 5 pixels, and then obviously, so I think I'm gonna need to. I'm struggling with what to call these pips. Die pip. I think I'm going to call it a die pip, and then I'll do a modifier to this where it's die pip. Yeah, so I think that's how I'm going to structure this CSS. That way, I can style all the die pips as uh. So I'm going to make these like width 5 pixels, height 5 pixels, border radius 50%. So I just want to make it a circle, and I'll make a background color black. This is die pip. That didn't work because I didn't save that. Okay, so then I'll do the same thing for this. Damn it. Just made a macro there. This is like pretty unwieldy CSS markup, but I think it's fine. All right, so now I have my modifiers and my CSS classes. So I think what I'm gonna do here looks like that's working well for top left at least. I'm gonna do top right just to see how this works. But yeah, like what's happening here, so these are not going to be like fully centered properly, and I'm probably going to need to do transform in a little bit, but I'm just going to try to get this working. Yeah, so I actually think that like I'm just going to do this now. So I'm going to transform translate negative 50%, negative 50%, and what that will do is just like center the. So when you do top left, top and left, or top and right, what you're doing is you're putting the. Actually, this is wrong now. Hold on a second. I actually need to think through how I want to do this.
What are you stuck on, Mike?
Yeah,
You look
sorry.
perplexed.
No, I'm thinking through like basically, if I want everything to be like well aligned, like top and left won't do it, because what top and left does is it positions it so that the top left oh, this is really tiny. So what position absolute and top and left do is it positions the top left pixel of the element at whatever top and left you set. So top and left, if I do 5 pixels, the top left pixel of the die pip will be at 5 and 5. And what I was trying to do here was basically set, like this will make it so that the center pixel is at this coordinate. But if
I'm not sure if it's Discord or your audio. I've lost Mike. I don't know if anyone else has as well.
James says wait, James, can you talk? Okay, other people can hear me.
Right, so yeah,
I think it's Discord. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so yeah, I was in the middle of explaining like why yeah, hide your screens. Okay, so I was in the middle of explaining why I would use this. So basically, like you can see the difference between like when I'm clicking. Sorry, I'm going to zoom in on the console as well. You can see the difference when I click on transform. How it kind of goes, like it goes from like not being centered to being centered. But the difference is actually this looks like it. No, yeah. So this pip at the top right will not be centered. So I'm actually gonna deal with this later because this is taking me too long. I'm gonna come back to this and figure out like what the best way to do this is. I'm thinking that it's going to be. I'm thinking that I'm going to not use top right. Like I don't think I'm ever gonna want to use right or bottom. So my plan was to like come and like do like top bottom, and then like bottom left, etc. I was gonna do something like this. That way, like it'll always be like 5 pixels from whatever edge that I'm trying to position it at. But that's not gonna work. So I'm gonna just like I'm gonna keep on the track that I was on, and then I'm gonna come back and fix like the exact centering later. Try not to get stuck like I did the way that I just did. This is like really tedious. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. Center left, which would be top 50% left, and then center right. And so what I should see here is like something like approximately correct when I look back on the browser. Okay, looks pretty good. All right, so let me see what actually is going on with this one. This is middle right. This is because I called it center, not middle.
Nailed it.
Looks pretty good, right?
It's close.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so if I get rid of this, I think it'll look better. No, it looks just as jank. Yeah, so let's think through the best way to do this. I may ask for a hint in a second, but don't. We'll see. All right, so
Okay, I'm excited.
Is 50%. This is 5 pixels. Yeah, so what you're seeing, like I said, is like this is positioning it the top left pixel. So you'll see that this sits like just below the center line, like the center line being here. So the pip is sitting below that. And yeah, if I were to add, translate translate here, it would center it. So I'm actually thinking I may use calc for this instead of like, so basically, like, I'm thinking that if I use top and left for everything, and like right now I'm using like top and like a mix of like top, right, left, and bottom. If I use top and left for everything, and I use this translate 50% trick, then that should solve the problem. So I'm gonna try that, and then if I fuck it up, then I'm gonna ask for a hint.
Okay,
So
sounds good.
that's my current plan. So I'm actually gonna create a CSS variable here called width, or I'll call it die width just to be more explicit, and then die height, and I'll turn these to, or I'll just call this like die dimension. And then this will be die dimension. That should still work. And then I will do a calc to subtract these things. Yeah, I'll do a calc to subtract these things. Left. So left would be calc bar die dimension minus. Oh, can I do this? I think I can. So this will subtract 40 from 5 pixels. That's not doing it. Why not? This should be left 35 if like I'm having a really hard time seeing this. This should be left 35 if I'm like calculating this correctly. So I'm a little confused why that's not working. Yeah, that's not going to work. Interesting. I actually want to figure out why this isn't working, because I feel like this should work. Because it, oh no, I guess like if I do top left, sorry, if I do left 35 pixels, I might need a hit. Hold on. Last attempt to figure this out. Okay. Yeah, I'm really confused why this isn't working. I guess. Oh, I guess I would need to maybe subtract. I need to subtract the dimension of the pip too. So let me see if that works. That's yeah, and then once I do the transform, I think it'll be centered. Yes, that's right. So this pip dimension also needs to be codified as a variable. And then I need to subtract it from this as well. And then this will be top. Yeah, okay. We're getting somewhere.
Starting to look more like a dice.
Yep. So every time I use right or bottom, it should be this crazy calculation. All right. Pretty touch and go there for a bit, but we made it. And I think I want this to be a little bit set further from the edge. So, whoops. That's too far. Okay. That was scary stuff. All right. Hey, Alex, welcome. Um, cool. I am rebuilding. Yeah, so I just to set the room. I am building a dice roller from front end eval. Basically, like I'm going to create the dice in CSS, and then I'm going to generate a random number of them. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. All right, so I will need to hide and show these conditionally based on. So this is going to be a very messy like conditional inside you because I need to hide and show these based on whatever value I get. So the top left will show when it's the top left will show when it's 4, 5, or 7. Like 6. The way I'm thinking about this is like I'm gonna go through each one of these pips and see when they show, and I'm going to basically have something that checks whether or not the value is one of these values, and I'll only render that pip if it is. So, for instance, if the value is and I'm going to use an array of with includes in here. So if it's 4, 5, or 6, that includes value, and this yeah, so it won't show there. And I'm just going to do this for every single one. There's a better way to do this, but I'm not thinking about what it is. So, okay, so I'm going to go through that for each one of these things. So, so for the top right, it shows on 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There might be some way to genericize this. I'm going to worry about that later. So the middle left will show for only 6. The middle right will show for also only 6. The middle, the bottom, or the center, I didn't even catch the center. It shows for 1, 3, 5, and 5. And the bottom left shows for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the bottom right shows for 4, 5, and 6. So I'm just gonna render all the dice. All right, we're in good shape. What's going on here in chat? Tech Rally saying a lot of stuff. All right. Okay. I think I got it. I'm not gonna be distracted by naysayers. Okay, cool. So now I just need to render the thing, and I just need to put it in a grid. So I'm gonna create a grid here. I'll call it die grid just to be more explicit. And then I need my input here. Number of dice. Label for number of dice. ID equals, just copy this. And this is actually going to be a number. And this is going to say number of dice. I think I need to make the label display block. Give it a little margin. And I'll center that in a little bit. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going pretty like fast and loose with these margins. I don't really care about them right now. I'll come back and like polish them up if this is not good enough. And I believe the syntax is this. Repeat 3, 1 FR. And I wanted a little bit of a gap. 20 pixels, or this is too many. I'll do 12 pixels. This is all random, Don't style your stuff like this. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, that grid. And then now we just need to set the number of dice. So I'm assuming that, okay, so I need a roll button. So I'm gonna do form, and I'm gonna call the row submit, or the submit button submit, roll. I'll do type submit just to be clear, but that's the default anyway. This is bad. I'm just like putting stuff on tags. It's not great. Okay. And we want the button to be full width. Lynn knows a lot about this if she's still here. Thanks, guys. That's crazy. I guess the shot will be like 100, and then the form itself should probably be a little bit more narrow. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. Alex says it's good that Mike's acknowledging the shortcuts. Yes, like these are not. This is like generally, like I said, I think in the first stream, like I'd almost never style with just like tags. I could come back later and like fix this up a little bit to be like more like, I started with like this block element modifier, like nicely, quote unquote nicely formatted stuff, but like I'm just like trying to get through it. Just make sure I have time. So I'm going to call this function roll. This is going to take an event. Form event. I believe. So yeah, so this will be, I'm going to fire this when I roll. I'm just going to like log that I'm rolling here. And I'm going to do the prevent default thing. So prevent default, for those who don't know, it's necessary to prevent, like, the default thing that the form does is it refreshes a page essentially. So without any action or method, it just like it just does another GET request to the page, and it looks like the page is refreshing. So that's why whenever you see, like, if you're doing something with a submit handler in JavaScript, you always see people like prevent default as the first thing. What is going on here? Oh, something weird happened with Prettier. That was weird. I've never seen that before. Okay, we're back. So when I click on roll, should say rolling. Yeah. So great. Okay. So I'm going to store the number in the input. Any questions so far? I feel like I haven't been looking at chat because I was so scared about this thing.
Yeah, there's a couple that have come up, which I think will be good refactoring discussions
Okay,
at the
cool.
end that we can come back to.
What's in there at first? I guess null. Um, So there's going to be a number in there eventually. Actually, it should be empty string first.
Alyssa has asked if you can walk us through that hook.
This use state hook or something else. Nyamike is saying, I really appreciate you, really enjoying you walking through the thought process. No problem. That's if I were just doing it without talking, it would be pretty boring stream. Yeah, so use state, this is, well, I mean, like, maybe like the part that's like really unfamiliar is the TypeScript part. Actually, I'm sorry, before I do this, I actually need to see if this is a string or not, and like if the value that I get back from the I think actually I can just figure this out from just like looking at this. So if I put like 1 in here, is this going to be a number? Actually, I need to get rid of the controlled input real quick. Sorry, Alyssa, I'll come back. Give me a second. Let me just figure out if how this is actually typed. It's a string. Okay, so yeah, that's going to be a string. So I'm going to have to convert that to number. Yes, so this is yeah, so basically like use state, it's a pretty bare bones React thing, just sets up a state variable that returns two it returns an array. Like the first element of the array is the value of the state, and the second is a setter. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be inside the input. I'm going to be creating an on-change handler that will take the value that is in the input and set it as a number of dice. So I'm going to do that right now. Actually, yeah, okay. I'm gonna set the number of dice, and then like this actually needs to be a string, and then inside of roll, I'm gonna convert this to number, and I'm gonna use that to render the dice. But this would be the target dot value. This is like just the standard way of like controlling an input, and the value of this is number of dice. So let me just make sure this works, and then I'll illustrate the data flow a little bit. Okay, so the data flow basically, like in when you create a state variable, like you're basically saying like this is again like a React 101 thing. So the React tutorial will explain a little bit better than me. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the value from the input and I'm setting it as a state parameter, and then I'm using that to populate the input with this value. That's the best way I can explain it right now. But again, the tutorial will be a little bit easier to probably process and explain in a little bit more detail. And then so when I roll, I'm going to output this number of dice, and just to make sure that like that's working properly. That's looking good. So I'm going to start by just saying I'm going to call this value because I'm going to convert this to a number inside of roll. And so now I have a number, and I'm going to set this to rolled dice count. And it'll start with 0. So yeah, I'm gonna have a separate state variable because basically like the value is just basically tracking what's in the input. And then when we roll it, we're basically gonna save it as a number of dice that will render, right? Because that's why we need this to be two different things. If I just like you could do this in one state variable, but it would be very hard. You'd have to use effect or something like that. I'd rather just use something like this. But like even yeah, like basically these two need to be two different state parameters, because like one is tracking just like the value, and one is tracking like what happens when you actually click the roll button. I don't want to basically like modify how many dice appear based like as I'm typing. And if I only use one state variable, I would. So I'm going to set rolled dice count to number of dice. And then I'm going to just going to output that here and see, just make sure that that's going correctly. And then I also want to check if number, for now, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to return. So if I'm out of the range, I'm not gonna render anything. I might come back and do an error message later. So this, you'll see that this is updating. That's good. I'm actually no longer convinced this is what we want, because I think I actually want to generate. I think I want to generate my array here of dice values. So I'm going to generate. So what I just thought through as I was thinking about this was I was going to do something like this where I like create an array. There's some like array fill like magic that you could like do where you like create a new array with like a certain length. And I was going to do this, right, with like this dice count. I'm Googling generate an array of n elements JavaScript. Like there's some like special hack you can do with this.
So just to, as Mike's Googling, it's a good idea at the start of the interview to ask, like, am I allowed to Google and look for, code samples there?
Do not just start Googling without.
Yeah. Most interviews nowadays, they seem to be fine with it. There was a time when, no, you have to do everything from memory. Thankfully, not anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, like if I do array from, array, if you pass in a number here, it'll create an array with blank, whatever number of elements. And I was going to map over that, and render a die for each one. And I was going to generate. So like, okay, there's something else that's going on here in my head, which I'm not saying out loud. How do I generate a number from 1 to 6, right? The way that I was going to do that is there's math.random, and this represents a number from 1 sorry, 0 to 1. So if you do math.random, it's 0 to 1. Oh, what? Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, math. If you keep doing this, you'll get numbers from 0 to 1. I was gonna do multiply by 6, and then math.floor, and then add 1 to it, and that will generate a number from 1 to 6. I'll come back and do that logic in a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna create a random number generate die value, and I'm just basically gonna do that. So I was already doing this in my head. I'll come back and talk through this. I'm pretty sure this will generate a number from 1 to 6 every single time. So I'll come back and talk through this in a little bit because I just want to make sure I get the problem done. So, great. And if you're wondering how I knew that off the top of my head, I did that recently and I remembered how it worked. So I will I'll come back and so yeah, basically I was gonna like go through and like render. I was gonna create an array and do a map and then render a die with that with a random value every single time. But that would change the array of dice every single re-render. That would change like the values. And so I think what we want to do is we want to roll the dice, like we want to quote unquote roll the dice when we click on roll and generate all the values and put them in an array here. So these like die values will be an array of values from 1 to 6, and then I will render these as dice in here, and that way, like I set the die values when I roll and not on every render. I'm sure that wasn't a great explanation, but I'm gonna do it, and hopefully it makes sense. And I'll come back and I'll explain it if people have any questions. So this is going to start as an empty array, and I'm going to generate. I'm going to use a regular for loop. Number of dice, I plus plus, and I'm going to generate values for every single die that I have. Nope, that's not right. Fonts new die values because I need to set this as a state variable. Okay, and then now I just map. So die value. I'm done.
I'm not going to count all those, but that looks like 99 dice to me.
I'm sure there's. Oh, I need to set a key. Actually, there's no. Like, I'm pretty sure I just need to do an I here. There's no other way to do it.
And it looked like you were already handling the edge cases with negative numbers. Any random weird input could be in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Looks like I'm right. So I can add error messages. I can come back and like I'll explain. I think like there's probably some things I should explain a little bit better. But I'm curious. Yeah, like do we want to go through extensions? Like how are people thinking about this? If I could also fix some of the styling here.
I mean, in terms of time, we're like you started like it was a good 5 minutes past, so we're definitely under an hour. I've taken track of a few questions. I've got some feedback as well. We do have some extensions. I don't know if you could do them in 10, 15 minutes. They're pretty tricky.
Hit me. I want to see.
Okay. If you go back to the front end eval question with the mock-up, there's two extensions on there. We'll focus on the second one because I think it's a bit more interesting. So the first one was about adding an animation. which is
Oh my
a lot more
God.
CSS. Yeah, I know. Let's ignore that one. The second one is having another component at the bottom which keeps track of historical dice rolls.
So previous roles being like, so you just dump them in another grid down here.
That's right. Yeah. So it's pretty clear that it's like a bit differently styled. You can take care of that yourself, smaller dice, but just almost like if you do like 5 dice or 3 dice at a time, it just keeps track of all the previous 10 historical dice rolls.
Okay.
Another pretty tricky one. I didn't have time to tackle this myself. I have some ideas of how it can be done, and I think you set yourself up for success with the way you approach the question so far.
Yeah.
Again, up to you, and also up to
Yeah.
everyone else watching. That's how we do this.
Yeah,
If you
I'm
want to do
curious,
this,
like, if anyone has an opinion, which, like, I think I can probably try and do either one of these within the next 10 minutes. But I'm curious, like, what would anyone have a preference? No preferences. Anyone? They need like a Twitch polling thing because I'm pretty sure
we
people
do.
just don't
Yeah.
want to like chat.
Next time, we'll have that next time.
Yeah. It'd be awesome if you could deep dive on a few design decisions. Yeah, I can do that. I'll do that, and then I will attempt to do the rolling thing. Xzeta is asking for the rolling animation, so I will attempt to do that. Man, actually, that like the way I set it up actually makes it really, really hard to set up the animation. But I'll see what I can do. But yeah, okay. So again, I think like some of the key points, Tech Rally. I think that one of the key points like down here was whether or not to, and like I think I have enough time to illustrate why the original approach I was going with is bad, right? So uh, I'm gonna just I'm just gonna like get add this real quick before I come back and mess up my solution. Okay, so I've added this so I can modify it and always come back to it if I want to. So the main decision point I think like with the die rolling, like I think like a lot of this is like pretty straightforward. Like okay, so we'll talk through like the pips. Um, I'm trying to think of like how else I would have done this. Like I could have done like another CSS grid to lay this out. I think that actually would have been a pretty good solution. Doing another CSS grid because you can do something like a grid template. I'm pretty sure this would have been a pretty decent solution. So I could have like laid it out so that like the way that this is reflecting is like this would have been like the top left, top right, bottom, middle left, middle right, middle. I could have created like a template like this and populated it conditionally depending on like which pips are active. There's always going to be some logic like this where it's like I have to just go through the pips and like see which ones are active when. And so like there's no really getting around that. But I'm just talking about like how I would have laid it out, like with position absolute versus like CSS grid or anything like that. So that is one consideration. I think that would have been harder because I'm not as comfortable with this style of like grid templating. The other solution would have been like Flexbox. I think Flexbox would have been really hard. Like to be quite honest, like I don't like maybe like each row could have been like I could have done like one for each row and then like done space between on each of them. And I still think it would have been really tricky, especially because like some of the pips would have been absent. And then like if that's true, then Flexbox doesn't really know how to like do the layout. So James, is there anything else like any other approaches that I could have missed?
Yeah. So I looked at a bunch of different approaches to this, and there were some really interesting ones. One that was just using box shadow to do all the faces.
Mm.
Another one which did just use Flexbox, where it was separated into at the most it was separated into 3 columns, and then each row would like position like either 1 or 2 pips, like left or right. But each face had to be defined like completely separately.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you couldn't just create the individual pips and then position them. you had to create a face with like 1 pip, 2 pip, 3 pips, etc. If you go back to your code, so one thing that really stood out to me is the way you're actually rendering the pips, which, if I'm doing a peer review, that's the first thing that's going to jump out to me. That's some pretty janky logic, and I'm talking outside of a coding interview here. In a coding interview, like I'd probably let something like that slide, and we'd have a discussion about it. In a pull request review, I'm probably going to be asking a refactor of that. One approach that I found and that I went for was defining a data structures like which face of the die, like a number or even an array, where the index is between like 0 and 6, and then that has an array for that key, which is which pips should I show for this face. It's kind of hard to kind of verbalize it, and I can't really paste any code in or anything like that. But that's a little bit cleaner. But I don't know, I'm kind of going back and forth on, is something like that better, where you define which pips to render in JavaScript? Is that better? Or should JavaScript not care about what a dice face looks like, and you find a way to do it in pure CSS, where maybe you just pass in you just apply a CSS class like face 1, face 2, face 3, and then CSS does the rest. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I think like you said, this logic is like the weirdest part of the thing. It's also not performant because I'm creating 6 arrays every single time I'm rendering for every single die on the page, which is like 99 in the worst case. And I'm doing a includes, which is an O of N operation on every single one of them, every single re-render. So it's like pretty bad for performance. So I think there's no correct way to do, like, this is not like a very common web development requirement to render dice. Like, this is like, if you were playing a game, like, you probably do like Canvas or something like that. You probably wouldn't be even like doing any of this in JavaScript. So yeah, I think Shashi wants me to add some rainbows to the dice. Probably won't be able to get to that, but yeah, I mean, I could also do this refactor where, like, essentially, like, you're talking about like creating like a pit map, right?
Yeah.
And
so
then,
if
like,
you can throw down like what it might look like.
Yeah. So one would be like, center. Wait, I'm just gonna go back to the diagram real quick. Yeah. So center is true, right? And everything else would be false, right? 2 would be top left.
Bottom left, top right.
Yeah, you're right. Bottom left. Also true, yeah. So you could go through and do it like this. Why is Prettier doing that? It's so weird. And then you'd fetch a die map, right? Pips equals pip map value. And then, like, if I could actually just do this right now. This is, like, I think this would be pretty valuable. Like, top left, something like that. That's what I'm thinking. Like, what do you think of that, James? Should I just do that?
Yeah. I mean, you're well on track. It should only take you a couple of minutes, and I think it's a cleaner approach. Again, both would probably be acceptable, but I'd probably be marking Mike a bit higher if he went for something that was a bit more extensible and readable.
I'll just do this real quick. Yeah, because I think this is the worst part of the code. So I think it's worth kind of refactoring and doing that. So 3, yeah, this is actually, like, it actually makes it a little bit simpler even for me to, like, kind of wrap my head around, like, because I was, like, kind of going through each pip and doing it that way. But this way, like, I can, like, just basically focus on one die at a time. 4 would be, and this would be a record number. Oops. So 4 would be top right, top left, bottom right. 4 and 5 is everything, and 4 plus the center. 6 is minus the center, and then both the middles. Okay, so then we go back through pips dot top right, pips dot middle left, pips dot middle right, pips dot center, pips dot bottom left, pips dot. These tedious sections are always annoying to show. Boolean false is not iterable. That's good. Oh, there's some prettier thing that destroyed this. Or I think I was in the middle of something. Oh shoot. I like broke everything. I'll come back. Yeah, but this is the same thing. So this is the same thing, but a lot cleaner.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that's a lot more understandable for me coming in as somebody who's maybe not seen this code before to understand like what you're trying to do there, versus like magic numbers and arrays filled with them.
Ooh, Ben has a really good question. And Exada. So Exada, I think this is quicker. Like I don't like this is actually should be interface. Like I use interface like all the time unless I have to use type. So yeah, these should probably be interface. Interface is just like better in like almost every way. The only thing that you can't do with them is like do union types or like intersection types. James, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's like I don't think there's any good reason to use type unless you have to.
Yeah, I generally use interface wherever I can and only use types if I need to, as you said, do a union or interface. And even then, you can use extends, but there's a couple of nuances. But most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm using interface.
Yeah. Ben has a great question about accessibility. This game is like very inaccessible. I think I think the ideal situation is just like probably like have like a screen reader only thing inside it here, right? So I'd be like, like SR only and render the value here. Actually, I think that would do it, right? I think this would do it, and like SR only would be like, why is this? I don't know what's happening here, but yeah, you do like SR only, and then you'd like do like the whole like position absolute like left negative 999 pix. Like basically just render this like off screen, and this would be read to screen reader, but then but it would show the pips, and like none of the pips would be read because they're just empty divs. So I think this works pretty well. Like, let me know what you think, Ben. I believe you are way better at accessibility than I am.
Steve Who Codes just had a good question actually related to front-end eval, which we were talking about recently. Is there a relation between easy, medium, and hard questions and junior, mid-level, senior roles that you might be interviewing for? So this one we put down as a medium question. I'd say the answer to that is there isn't right now. It is something we would like to do in the future, give a better indication of what you might accept, what you might be presented with at different levels. But what you tend to find in most interviews is a junior, mid-level, senior would get the same programming interview, but they'd just be judged slightly differently. So for example, in a junior, for this interview, I might expect them to just get the dice rendering and maybe get to the input part. For a senior, maybe they get all the way through that and the code is pretty clean, and maybe they get to an extension.
All right. It might make sense to make the grid as a UL. I've heard mixed things. I've heard mixed things about it because it like I've heard screen readers are pretty annoying about like reading list items, and so if there's a lot of items, I feel like it might take a while to get through. But they might have fixed that in recent years. So I remember like there was a whole conversation about like in nav whether those like, nav links should be list items or just like regular items, and like blind people weighed in and said very mixed things. So some people prefer it, some people don't. I don't know that it's like definitely one way or the other, but it's a good question. I want to see how voiceover is doing it these days. Gotcha. Ben says if it's a list, screen readers can actually skip over the list in one chunk, so some of that annoyingness is actually mitigated. Yeah, it's like it's really hard to talk about accessibility in a vacuum too, because like what is someone using this program for? You know, like what are they actually like getting out of this? Um, uh, yeah, so it's actually a good question. I'm not sure what the actual use case of this would be like. Is it actually valuable to be able to skip past like the entire die grid? Um, Exate is asking screen readers. Yes, it's basically like a utility. There's one built into Mac that reads through the web page for people who are sight impaired. So it'll read through every element on the page, and there's like keyboard shortcuts that they can use to navigate through. So yeah, it's definitely worth getting familiar with. Accessibility is incredibly important. Ben D Myers, follow him on Twitch and Twitter as well. He's an expert at accessibility. Actually, Ben, do you call yourself an expert at accessibility? I'm not sure. um, Great. I'm gonna like I have like 5 minutes now to do the rolling animation. Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yes, semantics dev. Accessibility advocate. I like that instead of expert. Who is really an expert at anything, right? Um, Great. I'm gonna attempt the animation, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna go poorly. But yeah. So essentially, what I think I'm gonna do is
Once again, I'm
this
going to time this.
yeah, this is gonna
5 minutes.
be. By the way, we're talking about accessibility. This is gonna be accessibility nightmare. This this rolling animation. Um, I guess like there's probably a way to make it not like that, but okay, all right. Let me think through what this is gonna look like. Um, I guess like how many like animation cycles are we gonna use here? Like, is there a spec for the animation?
So let's just say we want it to cycle through all the faces, and it can either be in order or it can be in a random order. Doesn't need to change speed or anything like that. We'll just say like 2 seconds of cycling through different faces until it
Okay,
lands.
2 seconds. I'm gonna change it every. I'm gonna change it every. Like I guess like 100 milliseconds. Uh, so it'll cycle through 20. That's a really long time. I'm gonna change it every 100 milliseconds for 1 second. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I'm going to call this like current value. Yes. X Zeta, do seniors get tested in accessibility? It depends on the company. And Ben is saying it's an expectation of the front end job. It is not only an expectation of the front end job, it is a legal requirement. You can get sued if your company can get sued if your company can get sued if your site is not accessible. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires you to make your site accessible to all people, including blind people. And so if it's not, you could be in big trouble. And like on top of that, it's like the morally correct thing to do. So, um,
So talk me through how you're
yeah. So yeah, good
of
question.
tackling
I
this
just
bad
like
animation.
got in the zone right away. Okay, so I am going to basically set. I'm gonna have this like current value, right? And I'm going to set it. That's going to be what's actually reflected on the die. But the value that gets passed in, that's going to be the one that we end up on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little interval that that goes every 100 milliseconds, or yeah, every 100 milliseconds, it will cycle through and generate a random value for. Actually, I'm going to I'm just going to generate a random value here. So every 100 milliseconds, I'm going to generate another random die value, and then I'm going to set that as the die value, and then I'm going to end on and I'm going to end on the the value that was passed in. So I'm going to set the current value to the value that was passed in after 2000 milliseconds. So I'm also going to, I guess, like keep track of like how much time has elapsed, because yeah, I'm basically doing intervals. I'm going to set time elapsed. I actually don't think this needs to be a state value because we're never rendering it, but I'm just going to make a state value for fun. I need to import this. Not 100% sure how I'm going to do this. I guess we could... I'm a little worried about like creating an infinite loop with set intervals. I may have to Google like what the best way to do a set interval in a React component is. I may actually just, yeah, I'm thinking like, is this a use callback situation or use effect? It's been a while. I'm gonna just like attempt to naively do this as if like I know what I'm doing. And let's just make sure that this works. So I'm gonna set current value to generate die value. So I like these should actually just cycle forever. That's what I'm like going for right now. This should just cycle forever, if I'm correct. Yeah. Great. Then we want to stop this after 200 milliseconds has elapsed, right? So actually, I think, okay, let me see if I can just like do this using set interval without even like the use effect. I'm worried about like, yeah, I actually think I need this use effect. So I'm going to set this interval ID, and then I'm going to track when this started. And then if the current time is more than more than 1,000 milliseconds after the interval started, then we want to clear the interval. I believe I need to do get time. I think like date.now is better. I don't have to create a date object. And then I should clear the interval and I should set the current value to the die value that I think it's passed in. I'm going to deal with this exhaustive depth thing later.
Wow.
So it doesn't re-render the earlier dice. I think I want to regenerate the key every time. Like basically, like that's because this key is not changing.
Yeah.
So, but that's the only thing, because otherwise it looks like I'm a genius.
It feels like Like
Yeah.
it's like
Um. Cool. Yeah, and I think I just need to put these. Oh my god, what happened? Um. Yeah. I think we're there. Like if I just fix this key thing. I'm just not gonna have a key because that should just do it. Yeah, I'm done. Great.
that's impressive. I was a little over 5 minutes, but still under 10 minutes. We're at 8 minutes, which is yeah, that's pretty damn impressive. I like your approach. Can you go back to the code again?
Yeah.
Might be good to because you were very in the zone there. Might be good to
Yes. Yes.
re-talk through
Um.
your approach.
Yeah. So I also want to talk through this. I realized I glazed over this die value thing. Hey, Annika. Um. I realized I grazed over this die value thing. So, um, this is yeah. So like I said, like you kind of build this up. Like the formula for this is like math.random. Like if you want to generate a number between x and y, it would be math.floor math.random times max minus floor. So that is kind of the way to do it because like there's no way to just like in JavaScript like math the only random number generator is just like math.random which like goes from 0 to 1. So if you multiply this by the number that you're going up to, like 20, that will get you a number like a number between 1 and 20, but like with you know all kinds of like random crap after it, right? And so math.floor then gets you the integer between 1 and 20. And then when you subtract, sorry, this is, yeah, yeah. Then when you subtract the minimum, uh, actually, yeah. So there's something here. There's something that like I only get because I'm looking from 1 to 6, but but I'm not even gonna think through like, oh, what if I want to generate a number between 5 and 20? I'm not gonna worry about that. So yeah, but this is like kind of the logic for how to create this function. Oh no, yeah, you add one to it. Yeah, you add one to it.
Yeah, and just to also fill in that there's you'll probably see math.floor, math.ceil, and I think there's math.round as well. Difference between the three: math.round is obviously rounding a number like either up or down, depending on whether it's like 0.5, like under 0.5 different or above 0.5 different. Math.floor always rounds something down, and math.ceil always rounds something up. So another thing Mike could have done here is rather than adding like the +1 at the end, you could have done math.ceil instead of math.floor.
Yeah,
I think would have also worked.
that would have been a better approach. Thanks, James. And now I just want to like make sure that like all the dice render. Yeah. So if you don't know, like in Chrome DevTools, you can do this shortcut, like jQuery like thing. This is short for document query selector all. It's the same thing. And something I did earlier that I didn't really focus in on is if you select one of these elements and you do $0, that will let you inspect it in the JavaScript console.
Super handy.
Okay, so yeah, let me just walk through the interval function that I wrote real quick, and then hey Lasha, Exata, what if I did a key? What if I put a key? If I put a key, then like basically like what would happen is this component wouldn't get recreated, and what that means is this use effect wouldn't run. And what you were seeing earlier, yeah. So I should explain like what was going on here. So this is kind of a React tricky thing that I think like even a lot of like more advanced people don't know. But like if two things have the same key in like when you're mapping over something and two like basically like you map over die values and then like on another render React maps over die values again. If the key is the same, React won't re-render this component. It will just leave it the same. And what you're seeing here is like if I add like another 10 dice to this grid, the first five have the same key as before because I'm just using the index of the array, right? So this key is I just pointed to my screen with my finger as if you could see. Anyway, so this key, this die has a key of 0. This die has a key of 1. This die has a key of 2, etc. And if you re-roll, then you won't see. Actually, sorry, I don't think I saved this. Yeah, so you won't see some of them re-render. I don't know why the first one re-rendered. There's something there, like we're at the limits of my React re-rendering knowledge. So hey, Tross Codes is here. What an honor. Front end horse. Um, yeah. So in this scenario, like you generally want a key in almost all scenarios. Like you want to prevent re-renders. This is one of the very first few times where like a re-rendering is actually good because it re-triggers the animation. You generally don't want to re-trigger basically like this animation only runs because of like because the key, like because the component's being re-rendered. I think what's happening with this is now this is anchored on the value as well. There's a lot of like complexity under here, like in terms of like why this is re-rendering and why it's not. Because I added this value to the dependencies array, use effect won't necessarily run if it's so basically like if it's the same value, it won't run. So you'll see, yeah, like you'll see like only new dice that get rendered are triggering the animation. So yeah, like there's like a lot of complexity here. But yeah, like if I change the number to be less, then the dice won't like regenerate. They won't even generate a new value. So yeah, that's what's going on. That was a very very like not even sufficient explanation to explain what's happening. But yeah, I'll run through. And Trosco's just to set the room. We are just building a dice rolling app that the prompt is here. It's an interview question dice rolling app that just like goes through and generates a certain number of dice and triggers a small animation to render certain values. Okay. I could refactor further. Yes, like this form should be a separate component. But theoretically, Alyssa, you could put everything in one component always. And technically, yes, like everything is one component. Like there's always one top level component that gets rendered in React. So in most cases, it's called app. And yeah, there's like yeah, React is just a tree of components. There's always one component at the very top level. You'd want to separate Exada when there's enough complexity. So die like certainly had enough complexity to be in a separate thing. Like I could have just like dumped it all in here. I could have just like dumped it all in here and like just done it in line. But that would make this app component really messy. And so it's just like kind of like a question of how much do you gain from separating it out into another component? In the die version, I gain a lot. Like I gain a lot of like I move a lot of complexity out of the app component into the die component, and all like the conditional pip rendering and stuff like that would be abstracted out. Can I do it in vanilla in the last 3 minutes? I cannot. But you know, I could post a vanilla code pen of this as well. Like I think this would be really hard to do, especially the random animation. Like I can't even think about how I would do that right now. It'd just be so hard to do. But yeah, I'll run through the animation in the last 2 minutes. But basically, like what I did was, if I didn't do this in the use effect, so I only want this to run like one time, right? Like I basically want to set the interval one time and clear it one time, right? And also like one other thing, just to be a good steward of my memory, I would want to clear the interval if this component unmounts for whatever reason before the animation finishes running. So that's another thing that's another like small optimization I would do. Um, so here I am. I'm basically taking this interval. So I'm basically saying like this is when I'm kicking off this interval. So I want to like run the interval for 1 second, like I said. So I would love to actually like extract this out into like, oh, this is like how long the animation should run, like animation duration. That's what I would call it. But I don't even have time to do that. So I'm basically saying like I'm gonna set this interval for every 100 milliseconds, and every time this interval ticks, I'm going to generate a new value for my die. So like inside this is like what happens on every tick of the interval. So I'm going to generate a new die value. I'm going to set it to my current value, and it's going to render in the die component. And then uh, I'm going to do a check on every single interval tick if enough time has elapsed. So if the current time and then subtracted from the interval. So like these, by the way, are Unix times. So I'll just show you what this looks like for those who aren't familiar. These are Unix times. So this is like the amount of milliseconds since like January 1st, 1970. So this is the amount of milliseconds. Like this is how like you calculate like how much time has elapsed. So this is how much time has elapsed, and is that greater than 1 second since this whole like component first rendered and the interval started ticking? If so, then we stop running the interval and we set the current value to whatever value is passed in, and then we're done. And then this is a small thing at the end that just says like if this component unmounts, we want to clean up the interval ID. We don't want to keep running it if the component unmounts for whatever reason. That yeah, like again, these are all like very very high level. These are very very high level summaries of like what's going on. But you know, uh, you have access to me. Like you can just ask me a question if you have any other questions. If you have any other suggestions for the stream, please just DM me on Twitter, or me or James, and
Yeah.
we'd be willing to think through like if there's any other ideas. But James, I'm gonna wrap this up. We're right at time. Any other comments or any questions from the
No,
from
I
the crowd?
mean, we actually had a few questions we didn't get to. Unfortunately, I had a decent amount of feedback, but we've unfortunately run out of time today. Not sure how we want to tackle that in the future, but maybe we can post a short follow up discussion either on YouTube or something like that. We'll think of a way to get everyone's questions in the future. But again, I think this was a great approach you took, and somehow you did it in time, and somehow you had a sprint at the end where you got the extension done in about 5 minutes, same as last week. So yeah, super impressive as always.
Cool. Thanks, James. Yeah, I mean if people want to stay on for like another like couple minutes, I'm happy to go through some of the questions if James if that's okay with you too.
I have time. I am more than happy to stay on for a bit longer, answer more
Tech
questions,
Rally,
and talk about
sorry,
feedback.
Tech Rally says go to frontendeval.com. Yes, I'm terrible at pitching the product that you and I built, and so appreciate you, Tech Rally, for tossing that out there. Go to frontendeval.com for front end interview practice. But yeah, like if people want to stay on, like feel free to drop off. It's no problem. I won't be offended. Thank you for staying as long as you did. But if people want to run through some questions, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. So have you been collecting them, James?
Yeah, I have. So did we want to start with some of my feedback? I could jump into some of the questions that came up throughout when you were in your flow zone.
Let's do like if you have any like super major feedback, let's go through that, and then if there's anything else, like I'd rather go through like the major stuff and then go through questions than just go through like all the like the more minor feedback.
Sure. So on the feedback front, honestly, all the feedback I was collecting as I went was pretty positive. You did spend a long time positioning pits, which I was worried about initially. I thought, oh no, we going to get to the end of this question? But yeah, you pulled it all together in the end. It's very understandable. That's definitely the hardest part of the question by far. I mean, the rest of it is just a simple form. Once you've got the rendering of the dice face, it's the rest of it's like pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The other feedback I had was, big one, was the actual rendering of the pips on the dice. So you could have made yourself a lot easier, I think, had you just wrapped the pips in a wrapper inside the actual dice itself, and then dealt with like the padding like around that.
Mm.
You see, so then you wouldn't
Yeah.
have to worry about like whether it's 5 pixels from the left or 5 pixels from the top. You always just have it zero. You'd still need to do your transform, but I don't think you would have had to
Yes.
do any kind of
God.
calc at that point. Would have made your
Yeah.
life a lot easier.
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Did
I
you want
always
to
get it.
like as you were going through that one? Did you want to like just put your explanation of how you would have done that out so we
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I
explain
think
that better?
like basically like the way that I would have restructured this based on James, I'm annoyed that I didn't think of that. But like I would create an inner box here. And then you could always just use top left. Like top left would be the corner of this box. Like middle left would be the corner of this it would be up against the edge, right? So if it did top
Yeah,
0 left 0, it would be like abutting the edge of the container. And if I did top right, it would be abutting the edge of the container. So definitely would have made life a lot easier rather than use crazy calcs.
yeah. That was honestly the only thing that came up that I would have like dinged you on a little bit, and probably um, I would have expected you in an actual interview. You probably would have thought of this one. Yeah, we've done similar questions like this in the past,
Yeah.
so I think you probably would have saved yourself a bunch of time there. But
Yeah.
everything else, yeah, everything else was great. You came up with a lot of things that a lot of better approaches than I came up with. I really liked how you did the animation at the end using just like a simple set interval. I was wondering, what did you think? So when you were doing that, I was thinking what you were going to do was you were going to do a set interval for the 100 milliseconds change in the faces, and then another set interval like to run after X seconds to clear the first interval. Would what do you think about like is one of those better than the other? I actually like what you did here. I'm just interested in your thoughts.
You mean timeout? Are you talking timeout?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. So
yeah.
you have one set interval and then one set timeout to handle clearing the first interval.
Yeah. I think this is like simpler for sure. Um, One thing that's interesting about like intervals and timeouts is like they don't run exactly at the 100 millisecond mark. And so essentially like yeah, when this interval ticks, it like basically or like when this every time this interval happens, it will like cue the next tick after the event loop. So like whatever the event loop, like whenever the event loop finishes running, it'll try to run this tick. It'll just keep queuing that after that, right? So there could be more time. Like this is a minimum amount of time it would take for the intervals to run. So set timeout would get you like I think a little bit more accuracy in terms of like this is gonna run exactly 100. Like it doesn't matter though in this case. Like
Yeah.
it's just an animation. So but if you're doing something a little bit more timing sensitive, it might make sense to use set timeout to do that. Um, in terms of like whether or not like the actual difference it makes to this problem, like I wouldn't have to clear this interval when I unmount the component. Like if I'm doing the set timeout thing, it'll just like take one more time and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's like a distinct advantage like using set timeout versus set interval. I feel like this is cleaner without like any major disadvantage.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Cool. So Tech Rally asks if this was for a junior developer role and they were able to implement the functionality but mess up a bit on the pip drawing, would they pass or fail? So from my perspective, especially if it was a junior, I would be more looking at how they broke down the question, how they tackled it, and how they dealt with some of the challenges that Mike came up with, where he was getting stuck on certain things. When's the right time to like ask for help, ask for a hint, or Google something, because that's where I tend to find most juniors fail, is they get really just stuck on one particular thing and fall down a rabbit hole, and don't take time to step back and look at, okay, I'm really stuck on this thing, step back from the problem for a bit, kind of get my bearings. So that's what I'd mostly be looking at. I wouldn't be trying to say like, no, you didn't get the pips at exactly the right pixel, so therefore you failed. Some interviewers might do that, but they're probably indicative of a bad culture.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm really looking at like how you tackle the question. You don't need to get 100% through. If you get most of the functionality done and like you're kind of there on the pip rendering, like if you tackle the problem in a good way but didn't necessarily get all the way there, I'd probably still pass you.
Agreed.
How about you, Mike?
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. Like I think like I would never expect a junior to position all the pips correctly. Like if something is hard for me, it's going to be very very difficult for a junior. So yeah, I think like just looking at like what the hard parts are. Like I think like I would be looking more at the form functionality and like the die generation process than I would be looking at the like, even if they were able to like generate like the numbers 1 through 5. Like I would or like 1 through 6. I would probably say like I would probably tell Junior to start there. Yeah, so I did the pips first because like I wanted to get the whole problem. But I think like I would definitely like if I were asking this as my interview question, which I don't know if I would, but I would definitely counsel them to start with the functionality and then do the rendering.
Yeah, I was focused on the pips. I thought he's ambitious to go for the hardest thing first. Because if I was in that position, especially if I was a bit more junior, if I try and tackle the hardest thing first and I get stuck, I'm probably in my head for the rest of the interview, and might do a little bit worse. So yeah, for me, the approach that I would have taken back then would be to, okay, think about like the big picture, like what's the overall functionality? Okay, it's random dice rolls. So let's get the like core functionality in, like where you have a form to submit and it displays like a list of numbers for the dice faces. Once I've got that, then I can just focus on the rendering of the pips. But I'm essentially like, for all intents and purposes, I'm like 75% of the way there, rather than getting stuck on the first 25% of the rendering pips. Again, not trying to ding you, Mike, because like you did it and you did it in under the time. But yeah, if I was a junior tackling this question, I would probably take the inverse approach.
Yeah, it's like basically like what I knew the expectations would be on me. Like I think like people like even like if I was doing this in an interview, I would feel like this person is interviewing me for a senior role. They're going to expect me to get the whole problem right, and so that's why I would start with the hard part. Um, but yes, like James said, I think like getting the functionality is probably probably makes the most sense for junior.
Yeah, I'd also going back to the question about accessibility and how you structure the form. I'd also be looking at things like for junior, like yeah, how did you structure the rendered HTML? So did you use a form with like a label and an input and an on submit handler, or did you just like throw an input like a straight input and a stray button and use an on click handler on the
Yeah.
button? So then I could ask you like, why did you do that? Like, is that the right approach?
This is the other way to do it, right? Where like
Right.
you delete this form. And something that like immediately jumps out as like a functionality difference is um I can't hit enter to submit this form. Which is like really
Yeah.
frustrating for keyboard people. Like if they're using keyboard to navigate. This is like something that like a lot of junior developers do is like just they use a button instead of like a form. The form is almost always the right approach for like something that needs to do an action on like a button click. Like if there's inputs involved. So now I can type in 10 and hit enter and it'll roll. So that's like a key difference between like submit and in addition to like all the like other voiceover things that come with using a form.
Yeah. Cool. So that was my feedback. Do you wanna go through some of
Yeah,
the
let's go through
previous
some
questions
questions.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Tech Rally asked at the start, can you elaborate the re-rendering issue versus updating the values on a roll click after you finish? That was
Yes.
a very early one.
Yes. So yeah, basically like I mean I can maybe even like do it now. I guess like yeah, essentially like if I were to create like actually this question doesn't even make sense anymore because I do other stuff when I roll, right? Because like I was originally just gonna like create my original approach was around taking the number directly from the input and like using that to generate an array of n dice and generate the numbers, right? And so I was gonna do that all real time, but that is no longer happening. I'm doing a lot of stuff when I roll. I'm like creating the array of dice, and so there's no longer a trade off here. But definitely like when I was thinking about doing this, like I could have just had like number of dice as like the input value, And then that would just automatically update this array every time I typed, which is not what we want. So that was kind of the trade-off, but like it kind of no longer makes sense in the new world.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I think this one was about where you on render. Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if yeah, so the big issue there would have been if the form re-rendered for any like random reason, it could have like regenerated those same dice again without you resubmitting the form.
Yeah. Cool. What else?
What else we got here? Another tech rally question. Couldn't it be easier to just have 6 separate components? Die 1, die 2, die 3, die 4, die 5, die 6. I know it's a pain, but I feel like the CSS alone would make this annoying to conditionally do it in a single component.
I think that was probably an old question too. I think this is okay. There's also like it would have made this really hard. Like this logic, right? Like having to like either duplicate it into all my different like my 6 different like die components, or like create a custom hook that we could put into all the die components. So yeah.
Yeah, I would also say, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, just gonna say, Nyamake, thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, 100%. I would also say if we look back down at your where you're using the die components. So if we had like a die 1, die 2, die 3, die 4, die 5, die 6, yeah, you could have done that, and then when you generate random die space, you just do like the value and like
it would have been this
die 1 and value and die 2. But I just love how I love the interface of your die component. Like it's obvious what it is. Like it's obvious what parameters it accepts, and it's obvious what it does, and it's like highly extensible. You could imagine like you could further extend that die component to accept like a number from like 1 to 20. You could have it as like a like higher number sided dice, and the consumer of that component like doesn't have to do anything different. They can just like pass it, like they can just pass in like number of faces equals 6, and then value equals 3, or number of faces equals 20, value equals 16. And the oh, am I using like the right components? It's all hidden under the abstraction of the die component, which makes it just so much like nicer to use.
Yeah, I think there could have been an argument for like different CSS classes, but like the actual React component should definitely have this interface. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, I think the last question we had was from Ben D. Myers, which was super interesting to see what folks have prioritized when answering. Like, for instance, someone could emphasize how they make their dice more accessible to screen readers. I guess actually we talked a little bit about screen readers already. I'm not sure if we've got anything else to answer there. But yeah, good call out on accessibility.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I think we're done. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, thank you, James, and thank you all so much for and thank you, Tech Rally, for helping to write some of the extensions. I will. I may do the previous die rolls thing just for fun, and I'll upload this to CodePen as well. But really appreciate everyone who came out, and James for asking the question. So if there's nothing else, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming along, and thanks Mike for being a good sport with these challenges. And yeah, look forward to next week when we have an even better Twitch setup in some unforeseen way.
Yes, it's going to be incrementally improved over this one. Like maybe I'll make my own overlays instead of stealing them from Peruvian Idol. Thanks, Alyssa, for coming out. Also, yeah, like I'm Generic Mike Chan on Twitch. James is J Robin Dev on sorry. I'm Generic Mike Chan on Twitter. James is J Robin Dev on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions or suggestions about the stream. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.